The first time Ambassador Lysander Kavari saw Empress Nithiel of the Virixi Empire, he thought she was a statue. Her opalescent skin shimmered like polished marble under the massive crystal chandeliers of the reception hall. Not a single muscle twitched in her face as she surveyed the delegation from Earth. Her 4 violet eyes, arranged in perfect symmetry across her angular face, didn't blink. Not once. "The Empress acknowledges your presence," translated her chief advisor, Magistrate Drovek. The elderly Virixi's voice crackled through Lysander's neural translator. "You may approach and present your credentials." Lysander stepped forward, acutely aware of how alone he was. The first human to ever set foot on Varix Prime, chosen specifically for this mission because of his reputation as an unflappable diplomat. His footsteps echoed across the vast hall as hundreds of emotionless Virixi nobles watched in silence. "Your Imperial Majesty," Lysander began, bowing deeply, "I bring greetings from Earth and the United Systems Alliance." The Empress remained, perfectly still. Not even a slight movement of her chest indicated she was breathing. If not for the occasional shimmer of light reflecting off her skin, Lysander might have believed her dead. "The Empress hears your words." Magistrate Drovek translated again. "She requests clarification on why humans insist on physical representatives when virtual communication is more efficient." Lysander smiled. "We believe in the power of physical presence, Your Majesty. Nuances that cannot be conveyed through digital means." Magistrate Drovek conferred with the Empress in their native language, a series of clicks and harmonic tones Lysander's translator couldn't fully process. The conversation lasted nearly a minute before Drovek turned back to him. "The Empress finds your species' preference for inefficiency perplexing. However, she has agreed to your terms of diplomacy." It was then Lysander noticed something peculiar about the entire court. Not a single Virixi showed any emotion. No smiles, no frowns, no expressions of boredom or interest. Their society was renowned for its technological achievements and ruthless efficiency, but nobody had mentioned this eerie stillness. Later that evening, in his assigned quarters, Lysander reviewed his cultural briefing files. The information was sparse. Humanity had only established long-distance communication with the Virixi 5 years ago. Nothing in the files mentioned their lack of emotional display. "Computer, search for references to Virixi emotional expression," Lysander commanded. Searching. "Limited information available. Virixi neurological structure suggests capacity for emotional processing, but cultural references indicate deliberate suppression. Royal lineage specifically engineered for enhanced emotional control." Lysander frowned. The Empire controlled over 60 star systems, had technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities, and maintained the most disciplined military force in the known galaxy. Now it made sense how they'd achieved such dominance. They'd engineered emotion out of their leadership. A soft chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. The door slid open to reveal Magistrate Drovek. "Ambassador," the elderly Virixi said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. "The information you seek is not found in databases. The truth about our Empress is more complex than you realize. If you wish to succeed in your mission, there are things you must understand." "I'm listening," Lysander replied. "Our Empress isn't merely controlling her emotions," Drovek explained. "She has none. 5,000 years ago, our royal lineage underwent genetic modification to remove emotional capacity entirely. Efficiency over empathy, logic over love. This is the foundation of our empire." Lysander felt a chill run down his spine. "But surely that's not sustainable." "It has sustained us for millennia," Drovek replied. "But now we face an existential threat that logic alone cannot solve. That is why we contacted Earth. We need something only humans seem to possess." "And what's that?" Drovek's 4 eyes focused intently on Lysander. "The ability to make irrational choices that somehow lead to survival against impossible odds. The capacity to hope when logic dictates there is none." The Virixi Palace gardens stretched for kilometers, a meticulously ordered showcase of alien horticulture. Lysander walked beside Empress Nithiel, uncomfortable with her perfect stillness. 3 days had passed since his arrival, and in that time, he'd seen the Empress make exactly 14 distinct movements. He'd counted. "Your gardens are beautiful," Lysander commented. "On Earth we have similar concepts, though perhaps less precise." The Empress turned her head exactly 15 degrees toward him. "Beauty is inefficient. These gardens serve 17 distinct ecological functions while requiring minimal maintenance." Lysander noted this was the first time she'd spoken directly to him without Drovek translating. Her voice was melodious but utterly devoid of inflection. "Sometimes inefficiency has value," Lysander suggested. "Humans often find that unexpected discoveries come from seemingly wasteful pursuits." "An irrational approach," she replied. "Yet your species has survived despite numerous extinction-level events. This paradox is why you are here." They passed beneath a canopy of luminescent flora that cast a pale blue light across their path. 2 silent guards followed at a precise distance of 10 meters. Never closer, never further. "The threat Magistrate Drovek mentioned," Lysander ventured. "Will you tell me about it?" The Empress stopped walking. "The Marvoth, a silicon-based consciousness that inhabits interstellar dust clouds. They consume all organic matter they encounter. Our predictive algorithms calculate a 97.8% probability of empire-wide extinction within 3 decades. Lysander felt his blood run cold. "And you fought them?" "Fighting is irrelevant. They are not solid, not alive as we understand life. They are a pattern that spreads and consumes." For the first time, Lysander detected the slightest change in her voice. Not emotion, but perhaps emphasis. "Our scientists have attempted 812 different approaches. All failed. So what do you want from Earth? Our technology is nowhere near yours." "Not your technology, your irrationality." The Empress resumed walking at exactly the same pace as before. "The Marvoth operate on perfect logic, as do we. Perhaps the solution requires something illogical." Lysander laughed, a sound that caused the guards to tense slightly. "So you want us to be unpredictable and hope that works?" "Hope is irrelevant. But yes, essentially." They reached a viewing platform overlooking the capital city. Towers of impossible geometry stretched toward the sky, connected by translucent transport tubes. Millions of Verixi moved through their daily routines with mechanical precision. "Your entire civilization functions like a machine," Lysander observed. "Correct. Peak efficiency. But at what cost? You've removed everything that makes life worth living." The Empress tilted her head. "Worth is subjective. Our civilization has existed for 15,000 years without internal conflict. How many wars has Earth experienced in its history?" Lysander had no counter to that. "Fair point. But if you're so perfect, why are you losing to these Marvoth?" For a moment, just a fraction of a second, Lysander thought he saw something flicker across the Empress's face. A micro-expression so brief, he might have imagined it. "We are not losing," she stated. "We are merely calculating an inevitable outcome, unless variables change." That evening, Lysander received a visitor in his quarters, not Drovek this time, but a younger Verixi female named Calix, who identified herself as the Empress's personal physician. "The Empress has requested your presence at tomorrow's High Council meeting," Calix informed him. "This is unprecedented. No off-worlder has ever attended." "I'm honored," Lysander replied. "But why me specifically?" Calix's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, the first emotional tell Lysander had seen from any Verixi besides Drovek. "Because you've already done something no one has done in 5,000 years," she said quietly. "What's that?" "You've made her curious." The High Council chamber of the Verixi Empire resembled an amphitheater carved from a single massive crystal. 36 counselors, each representing a different aspect of imperial governance, sat in concentric rings around the central platform where Empress Nithiel stood with perfect posture. Lysander had been positioned at her right hand, a place of honor that clearly disturbed the counselors, though their faces betrayed nothing. The human representative will observe these proceedings, the Empress announced. His insights may prove valuable. One counselor, distinguished by elaborate silver markings on his blue-gray skin, rose to speak. Empress, with respect, allowing an emotional being access to strategic information violates Protocol 74 Beta. Exception granted under my imperial authority, she replied without inflection. Proceed with the briefing. A three-dimensional projection materialized above the central platform, a map of the Verixi Empire with spreading crimson patches that resembled an infection. Marvoth expansion has accelerated by 12%, reported a female counselor from the inner ring. Colony world Zethrix 9 was completely consumed yesterday. 8 billion citizens lost. Lysander gasped involuntarily. 8 billion lives, gone. Yet not a single Verixi in the chamber showed any reaction. Not grief, not anger, not fear. Projected time until they reach Verix Prime? Asked the Empress. 2 years, 8 months, 17 days, replied the counselor. Unless their rate of expansion increases further. The Empress nodded once. Present the current containment strategies. For the next hour, Lysander listened as the council clinically discussed the annihilation of their species. They proposed solutions ranging from mass evacuation to dimension shifting. The entire empire, all dismissed as statistically unlikely to succeed. Finally, unable to remain silent any longer, Lysander stepped forward. May I speak, Your Majesty? The room fell silent. The Empress turned her head precisely toward him. Proceed. You're approaching this all wrong, Lysander said, his voice echoing through the chamber. You're trying to outthink a threat that thinks exactly like you do, only faster and with more processing power. Your alternative approach? Prompted the Empress. Stop thinking. Start feeling. Lysander moved to the projection and pointed to a planet near the Empire's border. This colony, what's it called? Athalis, replied a counselor. What if we evacuated Athalis, then detonated its star? Lysander suggested. Create a supernova to disrupt the Marvoth's advance. Analyzed and rejected, stated another counselor. The energy release would temporarily disrupt 17% of the Marvoth collective, but accelerate their adaptation process. Net negative outcome. Lysander ran his hand through his hair in frustration. See, that's the problem. You've calculated every possible outcome according to known variables. But innovation, real problem solving, comes from making leaps of intuition that defy calculation. The Empress studied him with her 4 unblinking eyes. Demonstrate this process. Lysander paced around the projection. Tell me something about the Marvoth nobody has mentioned yet. Something unusual or unexpected. After a moment's hesitation, a counselor from the outer ring spoke. They avoid certain types of stellar radiation, specifically the emissions from binary pulsar systems. Why? Lysander asked. Unknown. The pattern is statistically significant but lacks causal explanation. Lysander smiled. That's it. That's what we build on. Not understanding why, but using the pattern. Can you create artificial radiation sources that mimic binary pulsars? The counselors exchanged glances. The first sign of uncertainty Lysander had witnessed among them. Theoretically possible, admitted one. But deploying such technology without understanding the mechanism of deterrence is exactly what you need to do, Lysander interrupted. Sometimes you have to act on incomplete information. Take risks based on intuition. The Empress stepped closer to Lysander, closer than she had ever stood to anyone in his presence. This approach contradicts 5 millennia of Verixi governance philosophy, she stated. Yes, Lysander agreed. And that's why it might work where everything else has failed. For exactly 3 seconds, the Empress was silent. Then she said something that sent shockwaves through the council chamber. I will personally oversee the development of the humans' proposal. As the council session concluded, Magistrate Drovek approached Lysander in the corridor outside. You've changed something fundamental today, the elderly Verixi said quietly. In 5,000 years, no empress has ever involved herself directly in tactical operations. Is that good or bad? Lysander asked. Drovek's eyes blinked in that peculiar sequential pattern. Unknown. But it is interesting. And interesting has been absent from our empire for a very long time. 3 months passed. Lysander became a fixture in the Imperial Research Facility, where Virixi scientists worked to develop what they called pulsar emulation technology. Though they approached the project with their characteristic efficiency, progress was slow. Empress Nithiel visited the facility daily, often staying for hours to observe the work. Lysander noticed subtle changes in her behavior, micro-hesitations before speaking, fractional delays in her movements, as though something within her was fighting to emerge. One evening, as they reviewed the latest test results, Lysander found himself alone with the Empress in the observation chamber. The experimental pulsar emitter pulsed with eerie blue-white light behind radiation shielding. "Your scientists are brilliant," Lysander commented, "but they're still thinking too linearly." "Explain," the Empress commanded, though her voice lacked its usual crispness. "They're trying to perfectly replicate pulsar emissions, but what if that's not what deters the Marvoth? What if it's some side effect, some harmonic or interference pattern?" Lysander stood and paced around the holographic data display. "We need to experiment more wildly, try combinations that seem illogical." "Inefficient," the Empress noted. "Yes, exactly. Inefficient but potentially revolutionary." The Empress was silent for so long that Lysander wondered if she'd shut down somehow. Finally, she spoke. "I have been studying human history during rest cycles." This unexpected statement caught Lysander off guard. "Oh? What aspects interest you?" "Your art, your music, poetry." She turned to face him directly. "These serve no practical function, yet humans allocate significant resources to their creation." Lysander smiled. "They feed our souls, Your Majesty." Souls, an unquantifiable concept. She tilted her head. "Yet I find myself drawn to certain works. A symphony by your composer Mahler elicits unusual neural patterns in my brain structure." Lysander's heart raced. Was she describing an emotional response? "Would you like me to show you more human art?" he offered. "Yes." The word came quickly, too quickly for her usual measured speech. Over the next several weeks, as the Pulsar project continued, Lysander introduced the Empress to Earth's cultural treasures. They viewed reproductions of Renaissance paintings, listened to everything from classical music to jazz, read poetry from diverse cultures and eras. The changes in her became more pronounced. Her movements grew less mechanical. Sometimes she would pause, head slightly tilted as though listening to something only she could hear. Then came the breakthrough. A young scientist named Xyrix proposed combining the pulsar emissions with specific quantum frequencies, a suggestion that had no logical basis but came to him, as he described it, like a vision during rest cycle. The test results were spectacular. The simulated Marvoth sample in the laboratory didn't just avoid the emission, it disintegrated entirely. Empress Nithiel stood before the observation window, watching as the scientists celebrated in their restrained Virixi manner. Subtle, hand gestures and synchronized eye blinks their only expression of triumph. "This discovery came from intuition," she said quietly to Lysander. "Not logic." "Yes," he agreed. "Sometimes the greatest discoveries happen that way. My ancestors removed our capacity for intuition, believing it a weakness." She turned to face him. They were wrong. And then it happened. A single glistening droplet formed at the corner of her lower right eye. It trembled there for a moment before tracing a silvery path down her opalescent cheek. Lysander stared in disbelief. "Your Majesty, you're crying." The Empress reached up and touched the tear with one slender finger, examining the moisture with wonder. "So this is what it feels like," she whispered. "To feel News of the Empress's tears spread through the palace like wildfire. Though no official announcement was made, Lysander noticed subtle changes in how the court functioned. Conversations lasted longer than strictly necessary. Virixi nobles lingered after formal gatherings. Some even attempted hesitant smiles, awkward movements of facial muscles unused for generations. Magistrate Drovek confirmed Lysander's suspicions during a private meeting in the palace gardens. The royal genetic modifications were never completely successful, the elderly advisor explained. The capacity for emotion was suppressed, not eliminated. The Empress is the first in 5,000 years whose emotional centers have reactivated. Is she in danger? Lysander asked, concerned. Not physically, Drovek replied. But our society is built on the foundation of emotional suppression. If the Empress continues to develop feelings, it threatens the entire imperial structure. And the fight against the Marvoth? Accelerating beyond expectations. The pulsar technology has been deployed to 12 border systems. Initial reports indicate the Marvoth are retreating from these areas. Lysander smiled. So her emotional awakening is saving your empire. Perhaps, Drovek conceded, but there are factions in the High Council who see this as dangerous heresy. They believe she must undergo corrective procedures immediately. They want to take her emotions away again, after seeing how they've helped. Logic still governs most Virixi, and logically the imperial system has functioned for millennia without emotion. That evening, Lysander received an unexpected summons to the Empress's private observatory, a crystal dome atop the highest tower of the palace. He found her alone, watching the 3 moons of Varix Prime rise above the horizon. Ambassador, she greeted him, and he noticed immediately that her voice carried subtle inflections now, tiny variations in tone that betrayed emerging feelings. Your Majesty, he bowed. You wanted to see me? Yes. She turned from the view. I understand. There is discord in the High Council regarding my condition. Magistrate Drovek told you? He is loyal beyond his programming. She moved closer to Lysander. I have been examining my own neural patterns. The changes are accelerating. Yesterday, when I received reports of a successful Marvoth repulsion, at Coryllis Colony, I experienced what I believe humans call joy. It was overwhelming. Lysander noticed more subtle changes in her appearance. Her normally rigid posture had softened. Her 4 eyes blinked asymmetrically now, breaking the perfect rhythm they had maintained since he'd met her. Is that troubling to you? He asked, gently. It should be. Everything I was created to be rejects these sensations. She paused, searching for words. Yet I find myself unwilling to return to what I was before. Because you're experiencing what it truly means to be alive, Lysander suggested. The Empress raised her hand, hesitated, then gently touched Lysander's cheek, the first time she had initiated physical contact with anyone in his presence. The Council will vote tomorrow on whether to subject me to genetic resequencing, she said quietly. If they succeed, everything I am becoming will be erased. Lysander felt his heart beating faster. The implications were staggering. What can I do? There is a Virixi tradition unused for 5 millennia, called the Sovereign's Choice. If invoked, it allows the Empress to choose a path contrary to Council guidance, provided she can demonstrate it serves the greater good of the Empire. And you want to invoke this? Yes. But I will need you to speak on my behalf, to explain how human emotion, the very thing my ancestors rejected, might be our salvation against the Marvoth. Lysander took her hand, noticing how she didn't pull away. I'll do whatever you need. As dawn broke over the capital city, Lysander prepared for the most important diplomatic speech of his career. But what happened next would change not only his fate, but the destiny of the entire Virixi Empire. The High Council chamber buzzed with an unfamiliar energy as Lysander entered. The normally impassive councillors shifted in their seats, exchanged glances, whispered to one another, all behaviors he had never observed before. Change was spreading beyond the Empress herself. Magistrate Drovek met him at the entrance. The situation has deteriorated. The military coordination counselor is pushing for immediate intervention. They plan to declare the Empress functionally compromised and institute emergency protocols. Can they do that? Lysander asked. They need a 2/3 majority. It's uncertain if they have it. Drovek's eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress Lysander had learned to recognize. Be careful, Ambassador. What you say today will either save her or condemn her. The chamber fell silent as Empress Nithiel entered. Lysander gasped audibly. She had abandoned the traditional imperial regalia of metallic robes and geometric headdress. Instead, she wore a simple, flowing garment of deep violet that seemed to shimmer with her movements that were now fluid rather than mechanical. She strode to the central platform and raised her head. Before formal proceedings begin, I invoke the sovereign's choice. A shockwave of murmurs rippled through the chamber. One counselor, the military coordinator that Drovek had warned about, stood immediately. The sovereign's choice cannot be invoked by an empress whose neural functions are compromised, he stated coldly. Medical scans confirm abnormal activity in your emotional centers. The abnormality is not in my brain, Counselor Pevrix. The Empress replied, and Lysander was startled to hear a clear note of defiance in her voice. It is in our history. For 5,000 years we have denied our true nature. I stand before you not as a compromised ruler, but as the first fully functioning empress in millennia. Another counselor rose. The empire's stability depends on logical governance. Emotions lead to unpredictability, conflict, war, and innovation, the empress countered. Ambassador Kavari will address the council. Lysander stepped forward, aware that the fate of not just the empress but potentially the entire Virixi civilization hung on his words. Counselors of the Virixi Empire, he began. I stand before you as a representative not just of Earth but of a different way of existing. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans have lived with our emotions intact. Yes, this has led to war and suffering, but it has also given us art, music, love, and perhaps most importantly in your current circumstance, inspiration. He gestured toward the data display where the latest Marvoth containment statistics glowed. The breakthrough that is currently saving your worlds did not come from pure logic. It came from intuition, that spark of insight that can only exist when rational thought is infused with feeling. Counselor Pevrix stepped forward. One success does not justify dismantling 5 millennia of stability. With respect, Counselor, Lysander replied, you aren't stable, you're dying. The Marvoth would have consumed your entire civilization if you'd continued on your purely logical path. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices, another unprecedented event in Lysander's experience. The Empress raised her hand, and silence returned. I will demonstrate the value of emotional capacity, she announced. Turning to a control panel, she activated a communication channel. Bring in the children. The massive doors at the rear of the chamber opened. 20 young Virixi entered, children between what Lysander estimated as 8 and 12 Earth years. Unlike the adults, they moved with natural, unsuppressed motions. Some looked curious, others nervous. These children, the Empress explained, have been part of an experimental education program I authorized 3 months ago. Their emotional suppressors were deactivated under controlled conditions. This is heresy, Counselor Pevrix exclaimed. This is our future, the Empress corrected. She nodded to the children. Show them. The children moved to the center of the chamber. What happened next left the entire council speechless. They began to sing, not the mathematical harmonics that passed for Virixi music, but a true song with melody and harmony, rising and falling with genuine emotion. As the song continued, Lysander noticed something extraordinary. Tears, like the one he had witnessed from the Empress, began to form in the eyes of council members. First one, then another, until nearly half the chamber showed signs of emotional response. When the children finished, the Empress spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. The Marvoth threaten us because we have become like them, patterns without passion. To defeat them, we must reclaim what makes us truly alive. She turned to face the entire council. I propose not just a tactical shift but a cultural revival. The sovereign's choice I make is this. We will gradually reintroduce emotional capacity throughout our society, beginning with voluntary programs for adults and modified education for all children. The vote that followed was not unanimous. Nothing so revolutionary could be, but it was decisive. Nearly 60% of the council supported the Empress's proposal. The remaining dissenters, led by Councillor Pevrix, formally registered their objections but were bound by imperial law to comply. As the council session ended, the Empress approached Lysander privately. "What you have done for our people cannot be measured," she said, and now her voice carried unmistakable warmth. "You have given us back our souls." Lysander smiled. "No, Your Majesty. You always had them. I just helped you remember. The diplomatic mission from Earth was supposed to last 6 months," she noted. "That term expires next week." "Yes," Lysander acknowledged, feeling a sudden pang of sadness at the thought of leaving. "I'll be expected to return and report on our alliance." The Empress took his hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable when they first met. "I propose a more permanent arrangement. The Verixi Empire will need guidance as we navigate this emotional awakening. Who better to provide it than the man who started it all? Are you offering me a job, Your Majesty?" Lysander asked, unable to hide his smile. "I'm offering you a place by my side," she replied. And for the first time since he'd known her, the Empress smiled, a radiant, genuine expression that transformed her face from cold perfection to vibrant life. "As we build a new empire where logic and emotion exist in balance." 1 year later, the Marvoth threat had receded entirely from Verixi space. The pulsar technology, enhanced by increasingly intuitive scientists, had created an impenetrable barrier that the silicon consciousness could not penetrate. More remarkable was the transformation of Verixi society. Music filled the streets of the capital. Art appeared on formerly austere buildings. Citizens greeted each other with smiles and embraces, rather than mathematical precision. In the imperial palace, Lysander stood beside Empress Nighthiel as they watched children playing in gardens that had been redesigned for beauty rather than efficiency. Flowers of impossible colors bloomed in patterns designed to evoke joy rather than mathematical perfection. "Do you ever regret it?" Lysander asked. "Opening yourself to these feelings? Pain exists alongside joy after all." The Empress watched a child tumble and scrape her knee, cry briefly, then laugh as friends helped her up. "Every civilization must choose its path," she replied softly. "For 5,000 years, we chose cold certainty over warm chaos. We believed it made us superior." She turned to Lysander, her 4 eyes bright with emotion. "But we were not living. We were merely existing." She reached up and touched a tear that had formed in her eye, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude. "You came to our world as an ambassador," she said. "But what you really brought was liberation." Lysander took her hand, still amazed at how far they had both come. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or even our creativity," he told her. "It's our capacity to feel deeply and still function, to carry both sorrow and joy and keep moving forward." The Empress nodded. "A lesson my people are learning well." In the distance, a new monument was visible. A crystalline sculpture showing 2 figures, one Verixi and one human, reaching toward each other across a divide that grew smaller with each passing day. At its base, inscribed in both languages, were words the Empress had chosen herself. "Through the first tear came a flood of feeling. Through feeling came salvation." The end.